Hello and welcome to Grody and Unprofessional. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, we discuss how rocket science informs organizational architecture and how metrics-driven organizations are often driven into subversive stalemates. History reveals that established and successful companies are often ill-equipped to disrupt or substantially evolve the markets that they serve. Therefore, new market approaches or product categories are often introduced via startups or entrant companies into the market. In recent history, established companies have adopted the strategy of acquiring these startups in pursuit of shareholder-demanded growth. On the day of acquisition, executives commonly tout autonomous intentions for the freshly acquired businesses in the hopes of maintaining the innovative spirit, customer centricity, and correlated growth. Unfortunately, these aspirations are rarely realized, as well-meaning autonomous intentions die from 1,000 paper cuts at the hands of dozens of zealous internal and external stakeholders searching for conformity and uniformity. This is the second installment in a series of episodes which seek to share a decade of experiences collected within a market-disruptive, semi-autonomous division housed within a publicly traded company, which sought to foster and maintain a startup culture. During my tenure, I searched the annals of corporate history in pursuit of examples where established companies successfully isolated and empowered a countercultural division. My search led me to Skunkworks within Lockheed Martin, a division that has been set apart for more than 80 years, and Kelly Johnson's 14 Rules of Management, which seek to lay ground rules for operating such a division. Last episode, we covered the first and I believe foundational rule that the executive office must support and not interfere in the acquired division. Today, we continue our march through this list of rules. Kelly Johnson's second rule of management states that strong but small project offices must be provided both by the military and industry. While the first rule highlights the role of the executive office in maintaining the independence of a countercultural division, the second rule highlights the responsibility of the independent division to spend time and money in a predictable and profitable manner. This and other entries on the list highlight that Kelly Johnson's rules seek to govern a customer-facing company or division which is measured, at least in part, by profit and loss. This requirement for profitable operations sets divisions like Skunkworks, Pixar, or in my personal example, Precision Planting, in a different category than historically famous corporate research organizations like Bell Labs or Xerox PARC. While examples from both categories have contributed to the advancement of technology in their respective fields, there are, however, differences in mission and motivation between a corporate research organization and a customer-facing organization seeking to challenge the status quo in a given market through the development and sale of a product. Research organizations are generally afforded greater freedoms to pursue the advancement of knowledge without the direct burden of the commercial implications of their invention. During my tenure in the research division of a Dow 30 manufacturing company, we generally wrestled with questions like, where will technology be in 15 years? What macro trends may emerge over the next generation? And what technologies may be required to support those trends? Questions like these, asked inside of a well-funded research division staffed by brilliant PhDs, have produced technologies like radar, solar cells, Ethernet, and icon-based GUIs, from which society benefits greatly. In general, disruptive customer-facing organizations are unable to wrestle singularly with such distant horizons. They are burdened with both creation of new technology but also with the profitable commercialization of those technologies. One example of how this difference plays out is how the two types of organizations respond to a lost keys exercise. A lost keys exercise is the inevitable point in discovery or development where one encounters a phenomenon in which the root cause is not understood. In response, the engineer, like when looking for a set of lost car keys, begins the search by looking in the most likely places. But if the initial search proves unfruitful, one must start searching somewhat indiscriminately. Ultimately, I ask, when does a lost keys search end? It turns out it depends. Within a research organization, the goal is the pursuit of first principles understanding of the observed behavior or intended outcomes. Therefore, the lost keys exercise ends when you find the keys. In some cases, researchers spend an entire career investigating a lost keys problem. Within a product organization, however, time and resources govern. There are deadlines, there are customers, there are product launch schedules. Each person in a product organization has experienced the adage, as time goes to zero, effort goes to infinity. Product engineers who encounter lost keys exercises know there comes a point where the pursuit of knowledge is circumvented by the pursuit of a solution. There are times in a product organization in which one needs to abandon the search for the keys and break a window to get to the solution. Within the historical context of military contracts, it was very important that Skunkworks differentiate itself by staying on time and on budget. A strong project management office provides early warning bells into slipping timelines or budget overruns. In my experience at Precision Planting, we were able to attain the same outcome of early insight into slipping timelines and budget overruns without the use of rigorous or rigid project planning tools and mechanisms. In the broad acre agriculture industry, the industry we served, the grower uses a given piece of equipment for only a portion of each year. As an example, they only use a planter for a few weeks in the spring to plant their crop. The planter then sits in the shed for 10 months waiting for the next crop. This creates a drop-dead product launch date each and every year. After the customer finishes using a piece of equipment for that year, they have no need for the product until next year. An axiom often used in agriculture: if you are 1 week late, you are actually 51 weeks early. By knowing the key dates which needed to be hit leading into the annual drop-dead product launch window, we were afforded early visibility as to whether we were on a trajectory to hit the launch dates without the need of a dedicated product management office. We therefore combined the engineering, product management, and project management functions for a given product into a single, tightly knit, focused team, consisting of anywhere between 3 and 15 engineers. At any given time, there were between 6 and 10 product teams leading between 10 and 12 development projects across the division. In adherence to Kelly Johnson's first rule, the leader of a product team was afforded near total control of all aspects of the project, spanning from the initial concept selection through development and ultimately commercial delivery of the product. Concentration of so many responsibilities within a focused team was possible in part because of the nature of our products and our product architecture. However, it was also a product of our almost vicious manner of keeping teams small, which brings us to Kelly Johnson's third rule of management. The number of people having any connection with the project must be restricted in an almost vicious manner. Use a small number of good people. As few as 10 to 25% when compared to so-called normal projects. Twice in my life, I have stood at the base of a Saturn V rocket with its stages laid out horizontally. Once at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, and a second time at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The Saturn V rocket is an engineering marvel. Designed in the late 1950s and early 1960s by a team of NASA engineers led by Wernher von Braun. The Saturn V was the launch vehicle used in the Apollo program. To date, the Saturn V remains the only launch vehicle to have carried humans beyond low Earth orbit. When assembled, the Saturn V is roughly the height of a 36-story building, significantly taller than the Statue of Liberty. When fueled, the Saturn V tips the scales at 6.2 million pounds. I remember standing at the base of the first stage, looking almost 400 feet downfield towards the command module, thinking, all of this thrust, all of this energy, all of this structure to launch 3 passengers into space in a tin can the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. The phenomenon of why it takes so much rocket to launch so little payload is known as the tyranny of the rocket equation. All aspiring rocket engineers learn if you want your rocket to carry more cargo, you need to add more fuel. If you want to carry more fuel, you need a larger fuel tank. By adding more fuel and metal, if you're not careful, you may decrease the amount of cargo your rocket will carry. Therefore, you will be tempted to do what? Add more fuel. In rocket design, adding more rocket has less and less impact on how much cargo you can carry. The result, it takes 6.2 million pounds of fuel and metal to launch 3 people and their belongings through the atmosphere and into space. The physics undergirding the tyranny of the rocket equation force rocket engineers to scrutinize every single ounce. It is incredible to think that even before the advent of the computer, each ounce of a 6.2 million pound rocket had to be justified in an almost vicious manner. I would like to propose a similar phenomenon exists in regard to the size of organizations. Let's call it the tyranny of alignment. Most organizational leaders would agree that for a project to maintain speed and a high likelihood of success, each member of the team must stay on the same page. A rudimentary definition of staying on the same page could be that each team member has access to the collective knowledge of the project team to the end of equipping the completion of their component task. Otherwise said, everybody knows enough about what everybody else is doing to do their own part. Like the rocket equation, there is also a governing equation which calculates the number of person-to-person lines of communication present within a project team. The equation is n times n minus 1 over 2. For those of you that just winced at unsettling high school memories of using letters in math class, I'll give an example. If a project team has 5 people, there are 10 distinct one-on-one relationships within that team, meaning it could theoretically take up to 10 individual conversations for a team of 5 to get on the same page. Increasing the team size from 5 people to 20 people increases the number of distinct relationships by nearly 20-fold, from what was 10 relationships inside of the team to nearly 200. Following the equation, a project team consisting of 200 people has the potential for almost 20,000 distinct individual relationships. Undoubtedly, organizations seek to mitigate the tyranny of alignment by creating central project offices, by managing specification documents, or chartering a group to develop and maintain uniform processes and tools for all products in development. Unfortunately, each of these attempts brings with them more people, more organizational weight, and more complexity. Often the result is an organization constructed much like a Saturn V rocket. A huge fraction of the org chart is required to enable a small group, often located at the top, to complete the mission. Kelly Johnson viewed the addition of people to a project the same way Wernher von Braun viewed additional weight to a rocket program. One must guard against additions in an almost vicious manner. Regarding Kelly Johnson's third rule, I think the reader should wrestle with the inclusion of good. In his statement, use a small number of good people. I do not imagine that he was insinuating that broader Lockheed employed bad people. I do, however, believe the term good is meant to highlight there are important, even unique criteria which should be considered when evaluating individuals to join a disruptive, early-stage growth division or company. Practically speaking, this means the highest performing employees and managers in large, established incumbent companies are not assured success within the dynamic environment of early-stage growth. Numerous authors highlight, and my professional experience affirms, that disparate skills are required for those able to optimize an existing business when compared to those capable of exploring, planting, and cultivating new markets or product categories. Therefore, a leader should take careful consideration before cross-pollinating staff between established organizations and emerging organizations. And attempts to do so should initially be done on the fringes as opposed to transplanting staff into critical roles as a development opportunity. A good disruptive team member should thrive in a dynamic environment, challenge the status quo, be intrinsically motivated, favor action over discussion, be creative, and possess a communicate in motion mentality. These are traits that typically cause tension within entrenched organizations. Ben Rich, when talking about the good people that comprise Skunkworks, said, "By applying the most common sense methods to develop new technologies, we save tremendous amounts of time and money, while operating in an atmosphere of trust and cooperation, both with our customers and between our employees. This may be our most enduring legacy, as well as our source of lasting pride." In order for the disruptive organization to be different than the rest of the company in products, customers, and profitability, it must be stocked with a breed of employees defined by common sense, urgency, extreme ownership, trust, cooperation, and boundaryless collaboration within their ecosystem. Kelly Johnson's fourth rule of management is a very simple drawing and drawing release system with great flexibility for making changes must be provided. This rule highlights the need for simplicity, agility, and flexibility within the disruptive organization, even amongst mundane processes like drawing release systems. In contrast, most large company cultures have subconsciously concluded or even explicitly stated the pathway to growth is through the removal of all variation and perceived waste. The logical means by which one attains zero unexpected outcomes is through rigorous and thorough planning, resource allocation, and of course, robust process creation and adherence. Insert visions of Will Ferrell's character Lord Business ruling over the Lego town of Bricksburg with his tube of Craggle. Simon Sinek in The Infinite Game captures the pursuit of a growth through robust process mindset when he writes, "As an executive, it is easier to trust a process than to trust people. After all, processes are objective and reliable. However, a process will always tell you what you want to hear, but it may not be telling you the truth." I can't imagine many established market-leading companies are undergoing transformation projects seeking to add flexibility to the organization's process. When is the last time a manager stood up and declared the initiative of reducing the number of approvals and oversight to the end of empowering and entrusting employees to handle uniqueness and unexpected situations? The truth is that invention and disruption are messy and chaotic. An organization aiming for disruption must be prepared for and plan for the unexpected and for iteration. During my tenure inside the research division of a Dow 30 manufacturer, leadership regularly employed the phrase Edisonian research as a derogatory term. At first glance, it wasn't intuitive why arguably the greatest inventor of his age would have his name twisted into a pithy putdown. It was as if someone were to say, "Around here, we aren't doing that Lindbergh exploration," or "We don't want Shackleton leadership qualities in our division." The manager's point was that Edison was not a first principles inventor. He was an iterative inventor. Edison used the experimental principle of an informed next right step, rather than attempting to fully model the problem prior to running the first experiment. Within our research division, the cost of testing was restrictively high. Therefore, to keep costs under control, a responsible researcher should only use experimentation as a means of validating principles first theorized and modeled within a computer simulation. The leader's high view of invention fails to recognize that invention and discovery are messy, a process fraught with twists and turns. And a company is almost entirely in control of the cost of iteration. Through policy, process, and personnel, an organization defines how much time, effort, and capital are required to align, persuade, procure, prepare, and perform an experimental iteration. What was lost on the high-minded leader was that Mr. Edison was able to fail at a problem multiple times a day, in part because there was no purchasing engineers, which required 3 competitive quotes, or there weren't quarterly technology alignment meetings in which projects must re-justify their funding. Mr. Edison thought it, and with the lowest of overhead and minimal amount of time, he tried it, learned from the outcome, and then proceeded to the next experiment. During my tenure at Precision Planting, I and others placed the highest priority on stewarding employees' time and creativity. My desire was to curate an organizational culture in which an employee with an idea had the freedom to experiment quickly and cost-effectively. We sought to employ as little oversight and required approvals as possible. Experimentation should not occur in a vacuum, nor should it occur under a management microscope. I desired that if an engineer had an idea during the morning commute, they had the freedom to pull into a home improvement store and swipe the company card. Or if they needed to purchase goods from a supplier, there should be minimum necessary hurdles impeding progress. Our stated goal was to cut 3 years out of a product's path from concept to market when compared to incumbent organizations in the industry. In order to attain this goal, we needed to categorically reduce the total costs of iteration in time and currency when compared to the competition. We removed hundreds of alignment meetings, budget reviews, update presentations, leadership approval meetings, and resource prioritization meetings, freeing the team to iterate as quickly and cheaply as possible. It is critically important within an Edisonian organization that processes are flexible enough to bend with unforeseen circumstances, yet strong enough to support the team's pursuits. This philosophy is incompatible with corporate process theories, which aims to remove all risk through process and drive all behavior through metrics. Those that have worked in high process and metrics environments may be familiar with the trope, only what is measured is done. One often ignored reality within organizations which seek to drive behavior through metrics is that no department operates in a vacuum separate from the other departments. However, departmental metrics are often created in isolation from the objectives of the other divisions. The all too common result are dueling departmental metrics. And when departmental metrics are tied to individual compensation, what was dueling metrics transitions into dueling departments. One organization I worked with desired for their engineers to focus on improving product warranty issues. Logically, leadership tied the engineers' bonuses to improved failure rates of components driving warranty claims. In the neighboring purchasing department, leadership decided that the amount of time spent on supplier development needed to be reduced, and specifically the energy spent implementing engineering changes. Logically, leadership tied purchasing agents' bonus to minimizing the number of engineering changes implemented into the supply base. What could possibly go wrong? Quite expectedly, engineering leadership implemented a monthly status meeting in which engineers reported on progress towards resolving top warranty issues. Nothing drives action like pressure, and nothing creates pressure like a required status meeting in front of leadership. In the neighboring department, purchasing leadership implemented a monthly review in which requested engineering changes were rationalized through the lens of reducing changes in the supply chain. No easier way to hit a metric than to require staff to attain approval for previously unregulated behaviors. One may easily predict the result: a corporate tug of war in which neighboring organizations, driven by competing metrics, exhaust themselves without progress towards a solution. For almost a year, engineering and purchasing played a cloak and dagger game of mutual subversion. Ultimately, purchasing won out. After a year of debate, the organization decided the validated engineering change of a high warranty component wasn't worth implementing in light of supply chain logistics. For organizations that pride themselves on how processes and metrics remove chaos and waste, I guess these common interactions are out of sight and out of mind. In stark contrast, Ben Rich, the director of Skunkworks, writes of their engineering change process. We created a practical and open working environment for engineers and shop workers, forcing the guys behind the drawing boards onto the shop floor to see how their ideas were being translated into actual parts and make any necessary changes on the spot. Now, I can hear the rolling thunder of complaints that without metrics, there will be anarchy. Without visibility, every man will do what is right in their own eyes. The question to be wrestled with: how do you create structure with flexibility? How do you create visibility yet maintain a spirit of individual empowerment? Fostering coordination without falling into the tyranny of alignment. The leader of an organization should seek to have a single, guiding, customer-centric, company-inclusive metric, which all departments can look to, can be part of influencing, and are ideally incentivized by. There is still a need for discipline-specific goals and metrics. However, they should be organizationally and culturally subservient to the customer-centric, company-inclusive metric. There will be times when the right thing for the customer or the company will result in a discipline-specific metric to take a hit. Leadership and employees must be on board with this temporary reality of a discipline-specific metric ceding to a customer need, while seeking longer-term changes within the organization which align customer experience, company health, and discipline-specific metrics. An example from my career was the decision to launch multiple products a year earlier than design engineers would have desired. Leadership knew this decision brought with it increased warranty risk, increased product delivery risk, and increased burden on the support team. Therefore, the decision to launch a year early promised to push at least 3 discipline-specific metrics in the wrong direction, being warranty rate within engineering, on-time delivery within purchasing and operations, and average in-season call time within support. An early launch was deemed, however, beneficial for the company and for the early adopting customers clamoring for the technology. Had this example occurred in a metrics-driven organization, 3 departmental leaders would have been professionally and financially incentivized to block the launch, or at least position themselves and their teams throughout the process to divert blame to the other disciplines. Hundreds, if not thousands of hours would have been spent across the organization complaining, wringing hands, and scheming to ensure that when blame was doled out at the end of the project, they were found to have no fault. In our case, the single customer-centric, company-inclusive view allowed leaders of each discipline to rally together, knowing success could only be attained if each discipline was willing to bend their processes and momentarily suspend individual metrics concerned. A division or startup tasked with disrupting an industry must expect ever-present change. Therefore, the organizational architect must implement and defend processes which seek maximum simplicity and flexibility with the minimum necessary amount of rigor. The discovery and invention processes are chaotic and messy. If the company is built on the expectation of a linear and foretold path, stakeholders will be severely disappointed and employees will be severely frustrated. I'm going to wrap this, the second episode on how to build and maintain a startup culture in the spirit of Skunkworks through the lens of Kelly Johnson's 14 Rules of Management. Next episode, I will discuss my experiences with managing things like suppliers, R&D spending, and interdepartmental politics as part of leading a disruptive organization. For those that wish to share comments, praises, or large sums of money, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. For those with complaints, concerns, frustrations, or large objects you wish to throw at my head, my ham radio call sign is ID10T. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.